Chapter 23. I found Diomedes in his office. He was sitting on a stool in front of his harp. It had a large and ornate wooden frame with a shower of golden strings. "That's a beautiful object," I said. Diomedes nodded. "And very difficult to play," he demonstrated, sweeping his fingers lovingly along the strings. A cascading scale resonated through the room. "Would you like to try?" I smiled and shook my head. He laughed. "I keep asking, you see, in the hope you will change your mind. I'm nothing if not persistent. I'm not very musical. I was told so in no uncertain terms by my music teacher at school. Like therapy, music is about a relationship, entirely dependent on the teacher you choose. No doubt that's true." He glanced out the window and nodded at the darkening sky. "Those clouds, they have snow in them." "It looks like rain clouds to me." "No, it's snow. Trust me, I come from a long line of Greek shepherds. It would be snowing tonight." Diomedes gave the clouds a last hopeful look, then turned back to me. "What can I do for you, Theo?" "It's this." I slid the copy of the play across the desk. He peered at it. "What is it?" "A Tragedy by Euripides." "I can see that. Why are you showing it to me?" "Well, it's the Alcestis, the title Alicia gave her self-portrait, painted after Gabriel's murder." "Oh, yes, of course." Diomedes looked at it with more interest. "Casting herself as a tragic heroine, possibly. I must admit, I'm rather stumped. I thought you might have a better handle on it than me." "Because I'm Greek?" He laughed. "You assume I will have an intimate knowledge of every Greek tragedy? Well, better than me at any rate. I don't see why. It's like assuming every Englishman is familiar with the works of Shakespeare." He gave me a pitying smile. "Fortunately for you, that is the difference between our countries. Every Greek knows his tragedies. The tragedies are our myths, our history, our blood. Then you'll be able to help me with this one." Diomedes picked it up and flicked through it. "And what is your difficulty?" "My difficulty is the fact she doesn't speak. Alcestis dies for her husband, and at the end she comes back to life, but remains silent." "Ah, like Alicia." "Yes." Again, I posed the question, "What is your difficulty?" "Well, obviously there's a link, but I don't understand it. Why doesn't Alcestis speak at the end?" "Well, why do you think?" "I don't know. She's overcome with emotion, possibly." "Possibly. What kind of emotion?" "Joy." "Joy," he laughed. "Theo, think. How would you feel? The person you love most in the world has condemned you to die through their own cowardice. That's quite a betrayal." "You're saying she was upset? Have you never been betrayed?" The question cut through me like a knife. I felt my face go red. My lips moved, but no sound came out. Diomedes smiled. "I can see that you have. So, tell me, how does Alcestis feel?" I knew the answer this time. "Angry. She's angry." "Yes," Diomedes nodded. "More than angry. She's murderous with rage." He chuckled. "One can't help but wonder what their relationship would be like in the future. Alcestis and Admetus. Trust, once lost, is hard to recover." It took a few seconds before I trusted myself to speak. "And Alicia? What about her?" "Alcestis was condemned to die by her husband's cowardice. And Alicia?" "No, Alicia didn't die, not physically." He left the word hanging. "Psychically, on the other hand." "You mean something happened? To kill her spirit? To kill her sense of being alive?" "Possibly." I felt dissatisfied. I picked up the play and looked at it. On the cover was a classical statue, a beautiful woman immortalized in marble. I stared at it, thinking of what Jean Felix had said to me. If Alicia is dead, like Alcestis, then we need to bring her back to life. Correct. It occurs to me that if Alicia's art is her means of expression, how about we provide her with a voice? And how do we do that? How about we let her paint? Diomedes gave me a surprised look, followed by a dismissive wave of his hand. She already has art therapy. I'm not talking about art therapy. I'm talking about Alicia's working on her own terms, alone, with her own space to create. Let her express herself, free up her emotions. It might work wonders. Diomedes didn't reply for a moment. He mulled it over. You'll have to square it with her art therapist. Have you come across her yet? Rowena Hart? She's no pushover. I'll talk to her, but I have your blessing? Diomedes shrugged. If you can persuade Rowena, go ahead. I can tell you now, she won't like the idea. She won't like it one bit. Chapter 24. I think it's a great idea, said Rowena. You do? I try not to look surprised. Really? Oh yes. Only problem is, Alicia won't go for it. What makes you so sure? Rowena gave a derisive snort. Because Alicia is the least responsive, most uncommunicative bitch I've ever worked with. I followed Rowena into the art room. The floor was splashed with paint like an abstract mosaic, and the walls were covered with artwork, some of it good, most just weird. Rowena had short blonde hair, a deep-edged frown, and a wary put-upon manner, doubtless due to her endless sea of uncooperative patients. Alicia was clearly one such disappointment. She doesn't participate in art therapy, I said. She does not. Rowena continued stacking artwork on the shelf as she spoke. I had high hopes when she joined the group. I did everything I could to make her feel welcome, but she just sits there, staring at the blank page. Nothing will induce her to paint or even pick up a pencil and draw. Terrible example to the others. I nodded sympathetically. The purpose of art therapy is to get the patients drawing and painting and, more important, talking about their artwork, linking it to their emotional state. It's a great way to literally get their unconscious onto the page where it can be thought about and talked about. As always, it comes down to the individual skill of their therapist. Ruth used to say that too few therapists were skilled or intuitive. Most were just plumbers. Rowena was, in my opinion, very much a plumber. She obviously felt snubbed by Alicia. I tried to be as placating as possible. Perhaps it's painful for her, I suggested gently. Painful? Well, it can't be easy for an artist of her ability to sit and paint with the other patients. Why not? Because she's above it? I've seen her work. I don't rate her highly at all. Rowena sucked in her mouth as if she had tasted something unpleasant. So that was why Rowena disliked Alicia. Jealousy. Anyone can paint like that, Rowena said. It's not difficult to represent something photorealistically. What's harder is to have a point of view about it. I didn't want to get into a debate about Alicia's art. So, what you're saying is you'll be relieved if I take her off your hands? Rowena shot me a sharp look. You're welcome to her. Thank you, I'm grateful. Rowena sniffed contemptuously. You'll need to supply the art materials. My budget doesn't stretch to oils. Chapter 25. I have a confession to make. Alicia didn't look at me. I went on, watching her carefully. I happened to pass your old gallery the other day when I was in Soho, so I went inside. The manager was kind enough to show me some of your work. He's an old friend of yours, Jean Felix Martin. I waited for a response. None came. I hope you don't think it was an invasion of your privacy. Perhaps I should have consulted you first. I hope you don't mind. No response. I saw a couple of paintings I've not seen before. The one of your mother and the one of your aunt, Linda Rose. Alicia slowly raised her head and looked at me. An expression was in her eyes I'm not seen before. I couldn't quite place it. Was it amusement? Quite apart from the obvious interest for me, as your therapist, I mean, I found the paintings affecting on a personal level. They're extremely powerful pieces. Alicia's eyes lowered. She was losing interest. I persevered quickly. A couple of things struck me. In the painting of your mother's car accident, there's something missing from the picture. You didn't paint yourself in the car, even though you were there. No reaction. I wonder if that means you're only able to think of it as her tragedy, because she died. But in fact, there was also a little girl in that car, a car whose feelings of loss were, I suspect, neither validated nor fully experienced. Alicia's head moved. She glanced at me. It was a challenging look. I was onto something. I kept going. I asked Jean Felix about your self-portrait, Alcestis, about its meaning, and he suggested I have a look at this. I pulled out the copy of the play, Alcestis. I slid it across the coffee table. Alicia glanced at it. Why does she not speak? That's what Admetus asked. And I'm asking you the same question, Alicia. What is it that you can't say? Why do you have to keep silent? Alicia closed her eyes, making me disappear. Conversation over. I glanced at the clock on the wall behind her. The session was nearly finished. A couple of minutes remained. I have been saving my trump card until now, and I played it with a feeling of nervousness that I hope wasn't apparent. Jean Felix made a suggestion. I thought it was rather a good one. He thought you should be allowed to paint. Would you like that? We could provide you with a private space, with canvases and brushes and paints. Alicia blinked. Her eyes opened. It was as if a light had been switched on inside them. They were the eyes of a child, wide and innocent, free of scorn or suspicion. Color seemed to come into her face. Suddenly she seemed wonderfully alive. I had a word with Professor Diomedes. He agreed to it, and so has Rowena. So it's up to you, really, Alicia. What do you think? I waited. She stared at me, and then finally I got what I wanted. A definite reaction, a sign that told me I was on the right track. It was a small movement, tiny really. Nonetheless, it spoke volumes. Alicia smiled. Chapter 26. The canteen was the warmest room at the Grove. Piping hot radiators lined the walls, and the benches closest to them were always filled first. Lunch was the busiest meal, with staff and patients eating side by side. The raised voices of the diners created a cacophony of noise, born from an uncomfortable excitement when all the patients were in the same space. A couple of jolly Caribbean dinner ladies laughed and chatted as they served up bangers and mashed fish and chips, chicken curry, all of which smelled better than they tasted. I selected fish and chips as the lesser of three evils. On my way to sit down, I passed Elif. She was surrounded by her gang, a sherry-looking crew of the toughest patients. She was complaining about the food as I walked by her table. I'm not eating this shit. She pushed away her tray. The patient to her right pulled the tray toward her, preparing to take it off Elif's hands, but Elif whacked her across the head. Greedy bitch, Elif shouted. Give that back. This prompted a gulf of laughter around the table. Elif pulled back her plate and tucked into her meal with renewed relish. Alicia was sitting alone, I noticed, at the back of the room. She was picking at a major bit of fish like an anaerostic bird, moving it around the plate but not bringing it to her mouth. I was half tempted to sit with her, but decided against it. Perhaps if she had looked up and made eye contact, I would have walked over, but she kept her gaze lowered, as if attempting to block out her surroundings and those around her. It felt like an invasion of privacy to intrude, so I sat at the end of another table, a few spaces away from any patients, and started eating my fish and chip. I ate just a mouthful of the soggy fish, which was tasteless, reheated but still cold in the center. I concur with Elif's appraisal. I was about to throw it in the bin when someone sat down opposite me. To my surprise, it was Christian. All right, he said with a nod. Yeah, you? Christian didn't reply. He hacked with determination through the rock-solid rice and curry. I heard about your plan to get Alicia a painting, he said between mouthfuls. I see news travel fast. It does in this place. Your idea? I hesitated. It was. Yes, I think it'll be good for her. Christian gave me a doubtful look. Be careful, mate. Thanks for the warning, but it's rather unnecessary. I'm just saying, borderlines are seductive. That's what's going on here. I don't think you fully get it. She's not going to seduce me, Christian. He laughed. I think she already has. You're giving her just what she wants. I'm giving her what she needs. There's a difference. How do you know what she needs? You're over-identifying with her. It's obvious she's the patient, you know, not you. I looked at my watch in an attempt to disguise my anger. I have to go. I stood and picked up my tray. I started walking away, but Christian called after me. She'll turn on you, Theo. Just wait. Don't say I didn't warn you. I felt annoyed, and the annoyance stayed with me for the rest of the day. After work, I left the Grove and went to the small shop at the end of the road and bought a pack of cigarettes. I put a cigarette in my mouth, lit it, and inhaled deeply, barely conscious of my actions. I was thinking about what Christian had said, going over it in my mind while the car sped past. Borderlines are seductive, I heard him saying. Was it true? Was that why I was so annoyed? Had Alicia emotionally seduced me? Christian clearly thought so, and I had no doubt Diomedes suspected it. Were they right? Searching my conscience, I felt confident the answer was no. I wanted to help Alicia, yes, but I also perfectly able to remain objective about her, stay vigilant. tread carefully and keep firm boundaries. I was wrong. It was already too late, though. I wouldn't admit it, even to myself. I called Jean Felix at the gallery. I asked what had happened to Alicia's art materials, her paints, brushes, and canvases. Is it all in storage? After a slight pause, he answered, Well, no, actually, I have all her stuff. You do? Yes, I cleared out her studio after the trial and got hold of everything worth keeping. All her primary sketches, notebooks, her easel, her oils. I'm storing it all for her. How nice of you. So you're following my advice? Letting Alicia paint? Yes, whether anything will come of it remains to be seen. Oh, something will come of it. You'll see. All I ask is you let me have a look at the finished paintings. A strange note of hunger was in his voice. I had a sudden image of Alicia's picture swaddled like babies in blankets in that storage room. Was he really keeping them safe for her? Or because he couldn't bear to let go of them? Would you mind dropping off the materials to the grove? I said. Would that be convenient? There was a moment's hesitation. I felt his anxiety. I found myself coming to his rescue. Or I can pick them up from you if that's easier. Yes, perhaps that would be better. Jean Felix was scared of coming here, scared of seeing Alicia. Why? What was there between them? What was it that he didn't want to face? Chapter 27. What time are you meeting your friend? I asked. 7 o'clock, after her rehearsal. Kathy handed me her coffee cup. If you can't remember her name, Theo, it's Nicole. Right, I yawned. Kathy gave me a stern look. You know, it's a little insulting that you don't remember. She's one of my best friends. You went to her going away party for fuck's sake. Of course I remember Nicole. I just forgot her name, that's all. Kathy rolled her eyes. Whatever, pothead. I'm having a shower. She walked out of the kitchen. I smiled to myself. 7 o'clock. At 7:15, I walked along the river to Kathy's rehearsal space on the south bank. I sat on a bench across the way from the rehearsal room, facing away from the entrance so Kathy wouldn't immediately see me if she left early. Every so often I turned my head and glanced over my shoulder, but the door remained obstinately shut. Then at 7:05, it opened. There was the sound of animated conversation and laughter as the actors left the building. They wandered out in groups of 2 or 3. No sign of Kathy. I waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes. The trickle of people stopped, and no one else came out. I must have missed her. She must have left before I arrived, unless she hadn't been here at all. Had she been lying about the rehearsal? I got up and made my way to the entrance. I needed to be sure. If she was still inside and she saw me, what then? What excuse could I have for being here? I'd come to surprise her? Yes, I'll say I was here to take her and Nicole out for dinner. Kathy would squirm and lie her way out of it with some bullshit excuse. Nicole is sick. Nicole has cancelled. So Kathy and I would end up spending an uncomfortable evening alone together. Another evening of long silence. I reached the entrance. I hesitated, grabbed the rusted green handle and pushed open the door. I went inside. The bare concrete interior smelled damp. Kathy's rehearsal space was on the 4th floor. She had moaned about having to climb the stairs every day, so I went up the main central staircase. I reached the 1st floor and was starting for the 2nd when I heard a voice on the stairs coming from the floor above. It was Kathy. She was on the phone. I know, I'm sorry. I'll see you soon. I won't be long. Okay, bye. I froze. We were seconds away from colliding with each other. I dashed down the steps, hiding around the corner. Kathy walked past without seeing me. She went out the door. It slammed shut. I hurried after her and left the building. Kathy was walking away, moving fast, toward the bridge. I followed, weaving between commuters and tourists, trying to keep a distance without losing sight of her. She crossed the bridge and went down the steps into the embankment tube station. I went after her, but she didn't get on the tub. Instead, she walked straight through the station and out the other side. She continued walking toward Charing Cross Road. I followed. I stood a few steps behind her at the traffic light. We crossed Charing Cross Road and headed into Soho. I followed her along the narrow streets. She took a right turn, a left, another right, then she abruptly stopped. She stood on the corner of Lexington Street and waited. So this was the meeting place. A good spot. Central, busy, and anonymous. I hesitated and slipped into a pub on the corner. I positioned myself at the bar. It offered a clear view through the window of Kathy across the road. The barman bore with an unruly beard glanced at me. Yeah? A pint. Guinness. He yawned and went to the other side of the bar to pour the pint. I kept my eyes on Kathy. I was pretty sure she wouldn't be able to see me through the window even if she looked in this direction. At one point, Kathy did look over, straight at me. My heart stopped for a second. I was sure she had noticed me, but no. Her gaze drifted on. The minutes passed and still Kathy waited. So did I. I sipped my pint slowly, watching. He was taking his time, whoever he was. She wouldn't like that. Kathy didn't like to be kept waiting, even though she was perpetually late. I could see she was getting annoyed, frowning and checking her watch. A man crossed the road toward her. In a few seconds, he took to cross the street. I had already assisted him. He was well built. He had shoulder-length fair hair, which surprised me, as Kathy always said she only went for men with dark hair and eyes like mine, unless that was another lie. But the man walked right by her. She even looked at him. Soon he was out of sight. So it wasn't him. I wonder if Kathy and I were both thinking the same thing. Had she been stood up? Then her eyes widened. She smiled. She waved across the street at someone out of sight. At last, I thought, it's him. I craned my neck to see. To my surprise, a tardy-looking blonde, about 30, wearing an impossibly short skirt and improbably high heels, tottered her over to Kathy. I recognized her at once. Nicole. They greeted each other with hugs and kisses. They walked off, talking and laughing, arm in arm. So Kathy hadn't been lying about meeting Nicole. I registered my emotions with shock. I ought to have been hugely relieved that Kathy had been telling the truth. I ought to have been grateful, but I wasn't. I was disappointed. Chapter 28. Well, what do you think, Alicia? Lots of light, eh? Do you like it? Yuri showed off the new studio proudly. It had been his idea to commandeer the unused room next to the goldfish bowl, and I agreed. It seemed a better idea than sharing Rowena's art therapy room, which, given her obvious hostility, would have created difficulties. Now Alicia could have a room of her own, where she'll be free to paint whenever she wished and without interruption. Alicia looked around. Her easel had been unpacked and set up at the window, where there was the most light. Her box of oils were open on a table. Yuri winked at me as Alicia approached the table. He was enthusiastic about this painting scheme, and I was grateful for his support. Yuri was a useful ally, as he was by far the most popular member of the staff, with the patients anyway. He gave me a nod, saying, "Good luck, you're on your own now." Then he left. The door closed after him with a bang, but Alicia didn't seem to hear it. She was in her own world, bent over the table, examining her paints with a small smile. She picked up the sable brushes and stroked them as if they were delicate flowers. She unpacked 3 tubes of oils, Prussian blue, Indian yellow, cadmium red, and lined them up. She turned to the blank canvas on the easel. She considered it. She stood there for a long time. She seemed to enter a trance, a reverie. Her mind was elsewhere, having escaped somehow, traveled far beyond the cell, until finally she came out of it and turned back to the table. She squeezed some white paint onto the palette and combined it with a small amount of red. She had to mix the paints with the paintbrush. Her palette knives had immediately been confiscated upon their arrival at the grove by Stephanie for obvious reasons. Alicia lifted the brush to the canvas and made a mark, a single red stroke of paint in the middle of the white space. She considered it for a moment, then made another mark, another. Soon, she was painting without pause or hesitation, with total fluidity of movement. It was a kind of dance between Alicia and the canvas. I stood there, watching the shape she was creating. I remained silent, scarcely daring to breathe. I felt as if I was present at an intimate moment, watching a wild animal give birth. Although Alicia was aware of my presence, she didn't seem to mind. She occasionally looked up while painting and glanced at me, almost as if she was studying me. Over the next few days, the painting slowly took shape, roughly at first, sketchily, but with increasing clarity. Then it emerged from the canvas with a burst of pristine photorealistic brilliance. Alicia had painted a red brick building, a hospital, unmistakably the grove. It was on fire, burning to the ground. 2 figures were discernible on the fire escape, a man and a woman escaping the fire. The woman was unmistakably Alicia. her red hair the same color as the flames. I recognized the man as myself. I was carrying Alicia in my arms, holding her aloof while the fire licked at my ankles. I couldn't tell if I was depicted as rescuing Alicia or about to throw her in the flames. Chapter 39. This is ridiculous. I've been coming here for years and nobody ever told me to call ahead before. I can't stand around waiting all day. I'm an extremely busy person. An American woman was standing by the reception desk, complaining loudly to Stephanie Clark. I recognized Barbie Hellman from the newspaper and TV coverage of the murder. She was Alicia's neighbor in Hempstead who heard the gunshot the night of Gabriel's murder and phoned the police. Barbie was a Californian blonde in her mid-60s, possibly older. She was drenched in Chanel No. 5 and she had considered plastic surgery. Her name suited her. She looked like a starter Barbie doll. She was obviously used to getting what she wanted, hence her loud protestations at the reception desk when she discovered she needed to make an appointment to visit a patient. "Let me talk to the manager," she said with a grand gesture, as if this was a restaurant instead of a psychiatric unit. "This is absurd. Where is he?" "I am the manager, Miss Hellman," said Stephanie. "We've met before." This was the first time I felt even vaguely sympathetic to Stephanie. It was hard not to pity her for being on the receiving end of Barbie's onslaught. Barbie talked a lot and talked fast, leaving no pauses, giving her opponent no time to respond. "Well, you never mentioned anything about making appointments before," Barbie laughed loudly. "For Christ's sake, it's easier to get a table at the Ivy." I joined them and smiled at Stephanie innocently. "Can I help?" Stephanie shot me an irritated look. "No thanks. I can manage." Barbie looked me up and down with some interest. "Who are you?" "I'm Theo Faber, Alicia's therapist." "Oh, really?" Barbie said. "How interesting." Therapists were obviously something she could relate to, unlike ward managers. From then on, she deferred solely to me, treating Stephanie as if she were nothing more than a receptionist, which I must admit rather wickedly amused me. "You must be new, if we're not met." I opened my mouth to reply, but Barbie got there first. "I usually come every couple of months or so. I left it a bit longer this time as I've been in the States seeing my family, but as soon as I got back I thought I must visit my Alicia. I miss her so much. Alicia was my best friend, you know." "No, I didn't know." "Oh yeah, when they moved in next door I was a great help in getting Alicia and Gabriel settled into the neighborhood. Alicia and I became extremely close. We were confiding in each other about everything." "I see." Yuri appeared in the reception and I beckoned him over. "Miss Hellman here is here to see Alicia," I said. "Call me Barbie, honey. Yuri and I are old friends." She winked at Yuri. "We go way back. He's not the problem. It's this lady here." Barbie gestured dismissively at Stephanie, who finally found an opportunity to speak. "I'm sorry, Miss Hellman, but hospital policy has changed since you were here last year. We're tightening our security. From now on, you'll have to call before." "Oh God, do we have to go through this again? I'll scream if I have to hear it one more time, as if life wasn't complicated enough." Stephanie gave up and Yuri led off Barbie. I followed. We entered the visitor's room and waited for Alicia. The bare room had a table and 2 chairs, no windows and a sticky yellow fluorescent light. I stood at the back and watched Alicia appear at the other door, accompanied by 2 nurses. Alicia didn't portray any obvious reaction to see Barbie. She walked over to the table and sat down without looking up. Barbie seemed much more emotional. "Alicia, darling, I've missed you. You're so thin. There's nothing left of you. I'm so jealous. How are you? That awful woman nearly didn't let me see you. It's been a nightmare." So it went. An endless stream of inane chatter from Barbie, details of her trip to San Diego to visit her mother and brother. Alicia just sat there silent, her face a mask, betraying nothing, showing nothing. After about 20 minutes, the monologue mercifully ended. Alicia was led away by Yuri, as uninterested as she was when she had entered. I approached Barbie as she was leaving the grove. "Can I have a word?" Barbie nodded as if she had been expecting this. "You want to talk to me about Alicia? It's about time somebody asked me some goddamn questions." The police didn't want to hear anything, which was crazy, because Alicia confided in me all the time, you know, about everything. She told me things you wouldn't believe. Barbie said this with a definite emphasis and gave me a coy smile. She knew she had piqued my interests, such as, Barbie smiled cryptically and pulled out her fur coat. Well, I can't go into it here. I'm late enough as it is. Come over this evening, say 6 p.m.? I didn't relish the prospect of visiting Barbie at her house. I sincerely hoped Diomedes wouldn't find out, but I had no choice. I wanted to find out what she knew. I forced a smile. What's your address? Chapter 30. Barbie's house was one of several across the road from Hampstead Heath, overlooking one of the ponds. It was large and, given its location, probably fantastically overpriced. Barbie had lived in Hampstead for several years before Gabriel and Alicia moved in next door. Her ex-husband was an investment banker and had commuted between London and New York until they divorced. He found himself a younger, blonder version of his wife, and Barbie got the house. So everyone was happy, she said with a laugh, particularly me. Barbie's house was painted pale blue, in contrast to the other houses on the street, which were white. Her front garden was decorated with little trees and potted plants. Barbie greeted me at the door. Hi, honey. I'm glad you're on time. That's a good sign. This way. She led me through the hallway to the living room, talking the entire time. I only partially listened and took in my surroundings. The house smelled like a greenhouse. It was full of plants and flowers, roses, lilies, orchids. Everywhere you looked, paintings, mirrors, and framed photographs were crammed together on the walls. Little statues, vases, and other objects of art competed for space on tables and dressers. All expensive items, but crammed together like this, they looked like junk. Taken as a representation of Barbie's mind, it suggested a disordered inner world, to say the least. It made me think of chaos, clutter, greed, insatiable hunger. I wonder what her childhood had been like. I shifted a couple of tasseled cushions to make room and sat on the uncomfortable large sofa. Barbie opened a drink cabinet and pulled out a couple of glasses. Now, what do you want to drink? You look like a whiskey drinker to me. My ex-husband drank a gallon of whiskey a day. He said he needed it to put up with me, she laughed. I'm a wine connoisseur. Actually, I went on a course in the Bordeaux region in France. I have an excellent nose. She paused for breath, and I took the opportunity to speak while I had the chance. I don't like whiskey. I'm not much of a drinker. Just the odd beer, really. Oh, Barbie looked rather annoyed. I don't have any beer. Well, that's fine. I don't need a drink. Well, I do, honey. It's been one of those days. Barbie poured herself a large glass of red wine and curled up in the armchair as if she were settling in for a good chat. I'm all yours, she smiled flirtatiously. What do you want to know? I have a couple of questions, if that's all right. Well, fire away. Did Alicia ever mention seeing a doctor? A doctor? Barbie seemed surprised by the question. You mean a shrink? No, I mean a medical doctor. Oh, well, I don't. Barbie hesitated. Actually, now that you mention it, yes, there was someone she was seeing. Do you know the name? No, I don't. But I remember I told her about my doctor, Dr. Monks, who's just incredible. He only has to look at you to see what's wrong with you straight away, and he tells you exactly what to eat. It's amazing. A long and complicated explanation of the dietary demands by Barbie's doctor followed, and an insistence I pay him a visit soon. I was starting to lose patience. It took some effort to get her back on track. You saw Alicia on the day of the murder? Yes, just a few hours before it happened. Barbie paused to glump some more wine. I went over to see her. I used to pop over all the time for coffee. Well, she drank coffee. I usually took a bottle of something. We'll talk for hours. We were so close, you know. So you kept saying, I thought, but I had already diagnosed Barbie was almost entirely narcissistic. I doubted she was able to relate to others except as a function of her own needs. I imagine Alicia didn't do much talking during these visits. How would you describe her mental state that afternoon? Barbie shrugged. She seemed fine. She had a bad headache, that was all. She wasn't on edge at all? Should she be? Well, given the circumstances. Barbie gave me an astonished look. You don't think she was guilty, do you? She laughed. Oh, honey, I thought you were smarter than that. I'm afraid I don't. Alicia was no way tough enough to kill anyone. She wasn't a killer. Take it from me. She's innocent. I'm 100% sure. I'm curious how you can be so positive given the evidence. I don't give a shit about that. I got my own evidence. You do? You bet. But first, I need to know if I can trust you. Barbie's eyes searched mine hungrily. I met her gaze steadily. Then she came out with it, just like that. You see, there was a man. A man? Yes, watching. I was a little taken aback and immediately alert. What do you mean, watching? Just what I said, watching. I told the police, but they didn't seem interested. They made up their minds the moment they found Alicia with Gabriel's body and the gun. They didn't want to listen to any other story. What story? Exactly. I'll tell you, and you'll see why I wanted you to come over tonight. It's worth hearing. Just get on with it, I thought, but I said nothing and smiled encouragingly. She refilled her glass. It started a couple of weeks before the murder. I went over to Alicia and we had a drink, and I noticed she was quieter than usual. I said, "Are you okay?" She started crying. I'd never seen her cry like that before. She was crying her eyes out. She was normally so reserved, but that day she just let go. She was a mess, honey, a real mess. What did she say? She asked me if I noticed anyone hanging around in the neighborhood. She'd seen a man on the street watching her. Barbie hesitated. "I'll show you. She texted this to me." Barbie's manicured hand stretched for her phone, and she searched through her photos on it. She thrust the phone at my face. I stared at it. It took me a second to make sure of what I was seeing. A blurred photograph of a tree. What is it? What does it look like? A tree? Behind the tree was a gray blob. It could have been anything from a lamppost to a large dog. It's a man. You can see his outline quite distinctly. I wasn't convinced but didn't argue. I didn't want Barbie to get distracted. Keep going. That's it. But what happened? Barbie shrugged. Nothing. I told Alicia to tell the cops, and that was when I found out she hadn't even told her husband about it. She hadn't told Gabriel? Why not? I don't know. I got the feeling he wasn't all that sympathetic a person. Anyway, I insisted she tell the police. I mean, what's about me? What about my safety? A polar's outside and I'm a woman living alone, I want to feel safe when I go to bed at night. Did Alicia follow your advice? Barbie shook her head. No, she did not. A few days later, she told me she talked it over with her husband and decided she was imagining it all. She told me to forget it and asked me not to mention it to Gabriel if I saw him. I don't know, the whole thing stank to me. And she asked me to delete the photo. I didn't. I showed it to the police when she was arrested, but they weren't interested. They already made up their minds, but I'm positive there's more to it. Can I tell you? She lowered her voice to a dramatic whisper. Alicia was scared. Barbie left a dramatic pause. Finishing her wine, she reached for the bottle. Sure you don't want a drink? I refused again, thanked her, made my excuses and left. There was no point in staying further. She had nothing else to tell me. I had more than enough to think about. It was dark when I left her house. I paused a moment outside the house next door. Alicia's old house. It has been sold soon after the trial, and a Japanese couple lived there. They were, according to Barbie, most unfriendly. She had made several advances which they had resisted. I wonder how I'll feel if Barbie lived next door to me, endlessly popping over. I wonder how Alicia felt about her. I lit a cigarette and thought about what I had just heard. So Alicia had told Barbie she was being watched. The police had presumably thought Barbie was attention-seeking and making it up, which was why they had ignored her story. I wasn't surprised. Barbie was hard to take seriously. It meant that Alicia had been scared enough to appeal to Barbie for help and afterward to Gabriel. What then? Did Alicia confide in someone else? I needed to know. I had a sudden image of myself as a child, a little boy close to bursting with anxiety, holding in all my terrors, all my pain, pacing endlessly, restless, scared, alone with the fears of my crazy father. No one to tell, no one who will listen. Alicia must have felt similarly desperate, or I should never have confided in Barbie. I shivered and sensed a pair of eyes on the back of my head. I spun around, but no one was there. I was alone. The street was empty, shadowy, and silent.